Good afternoon. Happy Sunday, Jill.
Thank you. Happy Sunday to you.
Yes, yes. Thank you for taking the time out of your weekend to
Of
join
course.
us and really share some information with our audience regarding your career journey.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
I'm excited to.
we love connecting with professionals who just enjoy sharing their journey with others so that our community of young professionals, right, budding professionals that are college students can get a glimpse into others as they prepare for the college to career transition. So just start off by just introducing yourself
Yeah.
and share with us just an overview of what you're doing currently and your major and how did you decide to land on a major in social work?
Yeah, that's a good, it's an interesting question. So yeah, my name is Jill Bucaro. I'm a social worker by trade, and currently I serve as the manager of holistic defense at the Montgomery County Public Defender's Office in Dayton, Ohio. So we provide advocacy for individuals who are caught up in the criminal justice system. But when I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Dayton here. And really just went there because my dad worked there, so it was free. And he was like, "You have to go here." But I really enjoyed my time there. But when I started, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was always interested in like politics and like international stuff and history and things like that. So I started a degree in international studies. And it probably wasn't until like the middle of my sophomore year that I really started thinking about social work, and maybe social work like in an international kind of sense. But at UD, they did not have a social work degree. So they don't have a bachelor's degree in social work at the University of Dayton. They had a minor. And so I decided to stay at UD because tuition was free, right? And one thing we can talk about too is a lot of social workers in the field go on to get their masters of social work anyway. So I kind of made the decision that my sophomore year of college, let me like take some social work classes, let me see if I like it. And if I do, I can always pursue that master's, right? And move into the field and get licensure that way. So my junior and senior year, I took a bunch of social work classes to get that minor and loved it, and was pretty positive that that's what I wanted to do. And so then I left school I left UD, graduated with my international studies degree, minor in social work, and actually had a social work job overseas in Zambia in Africa. And I had been there, yeah, for 2 summers, and done some, I would call it like back then, this was back in like 2011. I had been there in like 2009 and 2010, and that's when HIV was still like a major issue. In like the sub-Saharan parts of Africa. So had done some like community health work and organizing around that, and was going to go back after college. And I had a contract to do that work for 9 months. But I actually got really, really weirdly sick. I got like kind of this autoimmune issue. I won't go into it here. Long story short, I couldn't go. So I kind of took a year off and was mostly sick, and worked part-time retail work, and then decided to go get my master's of social work at Ohio State. So I did the part-time master's program there. In the interim, I had landed a job at a youth homeless shelter here in Dayton, and worked there doing case management work, and got my master's in social work and graduated with that in 2015 from the Ohio State University. And then from there, kind of, I stayed at Daybreak for a while. I had different jobs there. I was like a clinical social worker. So I did like therapy and counseling and diagnostic assessments and crisis work and things like that. Did a lot of program development while I was there. And then kind of ultimately moved my way up in the company before I left in 2019. And during that time also, I worked towards getting my independent social work licensure, because licensure is like a really important thing in the field of social work. You have to be licensed, and a lot of people with their masters want to get their independent license. So I did that work from 2015 to 2017, and then stayed at Daybreak until 2019. So I think that answered the first part of your question. Is I kind of like took you
Did.
on a journey there. I'm sorry.
It did. So in your first role, we can either look at this, in your role overseas or your role, at Daybreak in Dayton. What would you describe a typical day to be like? And then what were some of those challenges that you would regularly encounter during your day?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'll talk about my first role at Daybreak. So, my first role at Daybreak was what we call like a case management role. So, it doesn't require a social work license. A lot of social workers, when they first start out, they do start out in case management. It's kind of, I know people kind of act like it's like one of the easiest things you can do as a social worker. I actually think it's one of the hardest and most impactful things you can do as a social worker. But I started and I was working with young adults, so individuals ages 18 to 24 who were living on the streets and who were living in the adult shelters in our city. And this was, back in the early 2000 teens. This is right when like heroin and that opiate epidemic was starting. So we saw a lot of drug use. We saw a lot of severe and persistent mental illness. And I was just out there, going through homeless camps, picking up kids, trying to get them housed, helping them get their benefits, their forms of ID, helping them get access to medical care, mental health care, addiction treatment. And yeah, I was really in the trenches my first couple of years. So I mean, a normal day is we start early in the homeless system, maybe like 6:37. And that's when they start coming out of tents, out of shelters, things like that. And we would just start working with our clients and doing what we needed to do to get them housed and get them jobs and linked and all of that good stuff. So did that work probably for about 3 years, 4 years until I kind of moved up into more, I did some clinical work for a while and then really moved into more management type roles and program development type roles. But I say all the time, I mean, it was a very high stress environment. There was a lot of crisis going on, like crises around safety, around mental health, around drug use. So it was really kind of like a trial by fire situation. And one thing our social work field is kind of plagued with is just there's not a lot of on the job training that's really specific and intentional in nature, because I think all of the agencies that provide this kind of service are so under-resourced, right? So you're kind of I was just kind of like a 23-year-old like idiot, and they just like threw me in, and I learned so much from my clients, and so I learned so much by messing up a million trillion times. But yeah, I wouldn't trade those first couple years for anything because they made me the social worker I am today. Mm-hmm.
So you said you were kind of thrown in like trial by fire and you learned so much along the way. What are some of the skills that you need to be successful in this role?
I think the biggest skill is you have to want to do it, right? Because it's really, really hard work. But I think some of the things that make me successful is you have to be patient. You have to be empathetic with people. You have to understand that people change and grow along their timeline, not your timeline, right? And you have to be understanding of that. You have to be, if you're not calm in a crisis, I don't think this would be a good job for you because there's a lot of crises all the time. And so you have to be pretty good at managing that and navigating that. I think organization is really important. Social workers always have way too much to do. They give us way more than 40 hours worth of work in a week. I've yet to come across a social work job where people are like, man, I'm just so bored. It's so slow. So I think having good organization and time management skills and just good people skills. And I really think the best social workers I know and the most transformational social workers I know are always keeping their eye on the bigger prize, right? On the bigger, more systemic issue, like understanding that, yes, I'm going to help these individuals find homes, right? I'm going to help them work the system to get the vouchers or the apartment or whatever. But I have to be thinking about how am I going to utilize my front row view, right, to this housing crisis to inform policy change at the local level, the state level, and the national level. So I really think you have to be good at balancing that and keeping your eye on the prize and on the bigger picture.
So that is a lot of balancing, right? You have to
Yeah.
be able to do your job every day, right, which is emotional and stressful. But then also kind of take a broader view.
Mhm.
When you think about those industry trends, right? And understanding, what that broader view looks like. How do you stay up to date in your industry? What really helps you to, whether it's reading and what really helps you to advance in your field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest resources for social workers is our professional affiliation organization. It's called the National Association of Social Workers, or NASW. Each state has its own chapter. So there is the Ohio chapter of NASW. We have an awesome chapter here. Our like leaders in the office in Columbus, they are really on top of like what's happening legislatively. They do a lot of advocacy there. They send out just short emails every week that are kind of letting you know what's going on. So, I mean, unfortunately, professional affiliations cost money, but when you are a student, you can join. I think it's just $60 to join. It's like 60, or it was probably 60 100 years ago when I was a student. It's probably like 80 now. I don't know, but I think it's less than $100, and you get to have that rate the whole time you're a student, and then for a couple years after you graduate as well, which is really cool. And you can do all of your continuing education through them. They have a lot of cool free trainings, and they really kind of keep you up to date on emerging trends in the field, which I think is very important. So that would be one way. And then I think the other is just, being like a conscious citizen, right? Checking the news even when it's depressing and awful, and thinking about, how can my experience, because the people who are making the decisions in our community often don't, see what's happening through the eyes of the most marginalized among us, right? And we as social workers have like the ability and the honor to walk alongside individuals who are super marginalized. And I think, it's important for us to share what we're seeing, what our clients are experiencing, on the other end of the spectrum, truly from where most of the decision makers sit.
And that is so important, right? You as a social worker have to create the real life picture, right?
Yes.
Of,
Mm-hmm.
of the issues that are going on because you're working with the clients day in and day out.
Yeah.
So engaging with the clients and having that level of compassion, but always keeping their needs first is very
Yes.
important in this field. So what would you tell a college student who is majoring in social work or considering majoring in social work? What advice would you give them?
I mean, I think the first thing I would tell them is it's the best job in the whole wide world. I don't know. Sometimes I think about, other people, and I just think like, man, they don't get to do this awesome. Like it's just some of the stuff that you get to see and experience is just it's incredible. And I think sometimes like I can't believe they actually pay me money to do this, right? Like it's so amazing. The lows are low, right? I think I would tell a student like I think it's some of the most fulfilling work that you can do, right? It can really feel like a vocation. You can get up every day and it doesn't feel like work. Sometimes it feels hard, but it doesn't feel like, oh, I am like trading service for a paycheck, right? It really feels like a passion, a calling, and it's just so easy for it to be that way. So that I think is the best part about it, and I would say there's hard things, your clients will die. You will, watch the people that you're advocating for and you're talking to every day and you're building relationships just get like pummeled, right, by the terrible, terrible system. You'll have to bear witness to that. You'll have long days, you'll have a lot of work, you'll have a lot of stress. So I would be honest about that. But I think, I always tell people like if you're interested in social work, like go volunteer somewhere, right? Like go to a soup kitchen, go to the shelter, go, work a food pantry, do something like that. And if you're doing that and you're enjoying it and it doesn't feel like work, then I think social work is for you. So many colleges have like these volunteer organizations. And one of the ways I realized I wanted to be a social worker is I signed up to help tutor inmates at Montgomery County Jail for their GED through UD. And so we would go there and we'd like get the GED book and we would be assigned an individual that was in the jail and we would help them study, right? In hopes that we would just, kind of work some of that muscle memory. And then the jail kind of like coordinator, case manager person could link them to testing upon their release. And so I did that. And I was actually like, I always tell people I was like the world's worst tutor, right? So I would like go there and like I would just end up talking to the people I was assigned to and like kind of providing that emotional support and like, thinking about how could we advocate for them in their cases. And I loved it. Like it was my favorite 2 hours of the week by far every week. And then I was like, holy cow, like somebody will pay me to do this every day. And so that's kind of, I think, one way too, that if you really find that you enjoy working with people and that volunteer work doesn't feel so much like work, then social work might be a good field for you.
That is an amazing way to get some experience
Yeah. Yeah.
and to, understand if this is something that you really want to do. I always encourage students to volunteer.
Yes.
That's a great suggestion. So your career path also took you to owning your own business,
It did.
right? So let's talk about the transition from Daybreak to owning your own company and what was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I have a business partner. I co-own a consulting and training company. It's called Third Wheel Consulting. And we do consulting work for nonprofits. We do training, for a lot of frontline workers in the nonprofit sector, but also in like the healthcare sector and in libraries and things like that. And then I do training supervision for social workers who are working on getting their independent license. So we kind of have like those three arms. Of the business. But we started it back in 2018 when I was still at Daybreak full time. For I think one of the reasons I mentioned in here is that there's just not a lot of opportunities. And I don't really think people are thinking about how do we develop social workers, right? Like, how do we provide meaningful training? How do we teach things like self care and boundaries and have really honest conversations about burnout, right? And all of those types of things. And I was not joking. Like when my first 3 or 4 years, like nobody taught me anything. They were literally like, Jill, here is a list of your clients. You are like, your brain isn't even developed. Jill, you're like 23 years old. Like, here is a list of clients and just help them. And I'm like, what? So I learned everything just like by having people yell at me and messing it up and then having some kind people, right? Like take pity on me and like show me the way. And I said to my friend, I said, there has to be a better way than this, right? There has to be a better way to train our people and to give them opportunities for growth. And then the same thing happened when I became a leader. Like I learned how to finally be a good case manager. And they're like, wow, you're a really good case manager. You should oversee a bunch of case managers, right? You should supervise them. But we're not going to tell you how to supervise people and how to do it effectively and how to pour into them or anything like that. So the same thing happened again. So we really focused when we first started a lot on just like training for frontline staff and like mental health and crisis intervention, about different substance use trends. I think I mentioned a lot of this time, it was the height of the opiate epidemic. We were seeing overdoses like crazy in Dayton. And we did a lot of leadership development as well for new and emerging leaders. And did that, and then the business just kind of grows from there. So now we have a couple contracts. We've worked with local colleges in the past, different nonprofits. We have a couple contracts with nonprofits where we're helping them build some programs. And then we do that training supervision. And, we're lucky that we get to have like some really amazing experts in the field subcontract for us, right? And train for us on contract. So, yeah, it was just kind of like a whim. And,
Mhm.
it's slowly grown over time. I do still have a full-time job. I work for Montgomery County, I think I said, at the public defender's office, but Third Wheel is busy. I mean, I would say we do about 20 hours a week of it between the two of us. Yeah, and we'll probably in the next couple of years have to start thinking about, can we sustain both full-time jobs and this? But yeah, so that's what we decided to do. We kind of saw a need and said, nobody around here is doing this. Let's give it a try. So
Yeah, and you're doing the important work because you don't want someone to get thrown into the fire and say, "Hey, here, do this," without having the skills necessary to do their job. So
mhm.
I commend you for seeing a need and then identifying how can you fill that need. You said a key word, and that is self-care.
Mhm.
How does Jill walk in self-care?
Great question. The short answer is it has been a journey, right? I think, I look back now. So I've been in the field over 10 years, right? I'm actually almost coming up on 10 years of when I graduated with my master's, which was crazy. It makes me feel very old, but that's okay. Um, and there have definitely been crises like where burnout has been a significant issue, right? Where I was overwhelmed, super stressed, and just all the way burnt out. And I can kind of think of like three big pivotal moments, right, in my career where I realized like, wow, I'm losing it, like I'm not being kind to my teams. I'm not being as empathetic as I could be with my clients. I'm mean and irritable and exhausted and stressed all the time. So it's a journey, and unfortunately, we see a lot of people leave the field because of burnout. And I think each of those times I got myself to a place like I can't imagine being anything other than a social worker. So I was like, Jill, you got to change. You got to change some stuff, if you want to stay in this field. So, you learn how to set boundaries. You get over the fact that your to-do list is never done. If there's any perfectionists out here watching this, I'm a major type A personality perfectionist. And I had to let social work break me a little bit of that, right? I mean, it's impossible. You will never catch up. So you find a way, you get better at triaging, you get better of, at letting go at the end of the day. And you have to keep your eye on your why, and why are you really doing this? And, kind of trim the fat of the things that you're doing that don't really match the why, if that makes sense. But I mean, I have strict routines. Like I make sure I get enough sleep. I make sure I drink, 80 ounces of water every day. I'm really mindful about like packing my lunch and packing healthy snacks and doing things so I stay like nourished and hydrated throughout the day. And I set boundaries with, people are like, hey, Jill, like, can we have a meeting this week? And sometimes I'll be like, no, like my schedule is full. You really have to be thoughtful about those boundaries. So it's a never ending journey for me, for sure.
So thank you for sharing all of those great insights. I believe that self-care is very important, and especially as students are thinking about or getting ready to transition into, their career, keeping self-care top of mind, understanding those boundaries, being confident when they need to say no,
Yep.
right? Is extremely important even as a new professional. So in
Yes.
closing, I want you to close us out with sharing your why. What is your why for being a social worker?
Oh, um, I mean, my why is, I always operate, I kind of have like two like quotes or mantras that always echo in my head, right? When I'm thinking like, God, what a hard day, like what a hard life, like what a hard career path I've chosen. Right. But the two things that always like bounce around in my brain, the first one is like, let me leave this world a little bit better than I found it. Right. I think each of us is charged to do that. And I am not like, I'm not going to like design an airplane or like, I don't have the ability to do that kind of stuff. Right. And I do think I'm good at the work that I do. And I remind myself like, especially in the work I do now, I get like I'm trying to do a lot of criminal justice reform, right? So as you can imagine, I get doors slammed in my face a lot, and it feels like I'm flinging myself up against a brick wall. But I tell myself like, Jill, even if it's just a little bit better, right? You've done what you needed to do. So let me leave this place better than I found it. And also, there's another quote, and I'm totally gonna butcher it, but it's like, do not come like here because you want to help me, right? It's like come here because you understand that your destiny is bound up with mine. And I truly believe that all of us in this world, here across seas, across town, across the river, we are all in this together, and if I'm not doing my part and pulling my weight, what the heck am I even doing here, right? And like I will never have true happiness, peace, and liberation until everyone else does. And so I think about that a lot as well. And just, we are truly all in it together. So
We are truly all in this together. And I thank you for spending some time with me this afternoon to pour in to the students that may be watching this episode. I really thank you for making the right choice today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.